3 years ago, the greatest fitness game to ever grace our homes was released, Ring Fit Adventure. This game combined video game fun with genuine fitness knowledge and movement mechanics to create a well-rounded, aerobic and bodyweight workout that was accessible to a huge swathe of people. It sold so many copies that it was the best-selling new RPG of the console generation, as far as a new intellectual property goes, and yet, it hasn't seen a single update since March 2020. So I'm here to tell you that not only will we not see any further updates or DLC for the original Ring Fit Adventure, we're not going to see a sequel on the Switch either. That sucks. There is nothing more in this world that I want than for this video to age like milk on a hot day, but it is what it is. I've got a few reasons for feeling this way. First, I think we should address why Ring Fit really should get a sequel, and I mean the number one reason is cash money. Nintendo is a business after all, and money talks. Ring Fit Adventure sells at RRP for about 125 Australian dollars or about 80 US dollars because of the additional peripherals like the ring and the leg strap that are needed to play it. And as for the most recent sales figures at recording, which is June the 30th, 2022, Ring Fit Adventure sits in the top 10 Switch games sold during the console's lifetime, with a whopping 14.54 million units sold worldwide. For context, this is sitting just behind Pokemon Let's Go and the Pokemon Sinnoh remakes, so that is quite a considerable amount of copies sold. This game has a massive user base, and whilst you cannot deny that Ring Fit sold so many copies due to the pandemic of recent years, its popularity is something to behold. They made console bundles for it in Europe, and China had official spin-off merch, and at least here in Australia I know from friends it was sold out for a solid 3 months, and it wasn't available to be freely sold without an order for double that. Whatever the combination of reasons are, it was and still is a good seller for Nintendo. And it's not just sales, you do have active communities here in the West and out in Japan and China, with people like myself making content on it, active supportive groups where people cheer on their successes in Ring Fit, and a whole speedrunning scene attached. It has a lot of active players, and so combined with sales like it has, a sequel should surely be on the cards. Splatoon 1 topped out at 4.95 million sales and got multiple sequels, so why wouldn't a title like Ring Fit that hit just under triple that be considered for a sequel or at least a DLC expansion? It's a tough one because there's so much that we don't actually know, but my first point as to why it's not going to get this is to do with the currently available DLC and updates. Ring Fit received that free update in March 2020 to include a jogging mode and a rhythm dance game, as well as some other quality of life upgrades. After that, nothing. The world went into lockdown very soon after, and home workouts were needed more than ever before, and yet we saw nothing from Ring Fit Adventure. If Nintendo were going to capitalise on this game, surely they'd have greenlit some sort of expansion or some sort of update, especially considering the demand for home workouts at the time and the demand for the game itself. Whether it be more story, more rhythm songs, extra workouts or minigames or whatever, we haven't seen them touch the game since. This lack of attention indicates to me that they are done with the original game and have moved on to something else, which is point number 2. But what did they move on to? Well, I'm glad you asked. Ring Fit Adventure was developed by Nintendo's internal entertainment planning and development studios in association with SRD Co. Limited, who are long-term collaborators of Nintendo's. There are multiple Nintendo EPD studios, but the one that handles the kind of more out there, zanier, Nintendo-y titles is EPD4. They're responsible for Ring Fit Adventure, of course, as well as Mario Kart Live Home Circuit, Game Builder Garage, 1-2 Switch, and the Labo series as well. The project that this studio went on to, well, I've already mentioned Game Builder Garage, they made that one, but there's also something that viewers of this channel will be familiar with. Nintendo Switch Sports. That's right, the sequel to Wii Sports itself was developed by the same studio that made Ring Fit. We know that many key players from Switch Sports were from the dev team behind Ring Fit as well. Shinji Okane was the program director for both titles, and the sound director for Switch Sports, Natsuko Yokoyama, was behind the sound effects of Ring Fit Adventure. There are lots of other names that pop up for both games, network programmers, UI programmers and such, and although comparing each name to each game is quite difficult, there is a significant enough crossover to lead me to believe that lots of the team behind Ring Fit moved on to Switch Sports. Now, Switch Sports isn't done as of this video either. They literally just released an update with more bug fixes and more costumes to earn in the game, and they are also working on the golf expansion. And it wouldn't surprise me to see more content from Nintendo Switch Sports in the future, given its own sales record between release in late April and the end of June, selling just under 5 million copies worldwide. Nintendo themselves stated, since its release, sell-through has remained stable without a significant decline in sales pace, suggesting that the title title has potential for long-term growth in sales. This indicates to me that they consider additional content or updates to follow up a growing user base. And relating it to Ring Fit, I do feel it's been a bit too long since Ring Fit's last update, and considering we know the team is actively working on other ongoing titles, I'd wager we won't see anything further added to Ring Fit at this time. Of course, it's not impossible. One of my favourite games of all time, Borderlands 2, actually released a DLC upgrade 7 years after launch, just before the launch of the sequel to that game, and that was like 3 years after the last content update, so it's definitely not impossible, but that's the exception and not the rule. Besides, knowing the user base of the game, if they were going to release a DLC expansion or something like that, wouldn't they have done it already? Like, a smaller DLC would not take a huge amount of time to release, and I know the pandemic has affected development, I'm well aware of that, but surely they would have had something released by now. But the fact that we didn't get anything in the September Direct is partially why I've made this video. And as far as my bold statement from the start of the video about there being no sequel on the Nintendo Switch, as much as there is literally nothing more that I want from Nintendo right now than a Ring Fit sequel, I just don't see it being possible. We have to consider when that title would release in the Switch's life cycle and whether it would be worth it financially. And I'm going to quickly warn you right now that there's a fair amount of speculation at this point, so, you know, if you want to debate it, jump down in the comments, let's go. The Switch will turn 6 in March and will be fairly far into the second half of its life, in my opinion. Production teams often work on multiple titles, but it's likely that for EPD4, Switch Sports is still their focus, with smaller games on the sidelines, your things like Mario Kart Live and Game Builder Garage in size. Something like Ring Fit 2 would need to be a primary focus for them. So with Switch Sports having released in the past year, any sequel would not be too far into production, considering they would need to up the size and scale of a Ring Fit sequel, because otherwise what's the point? We wouldn't realistically see it until 2024, and even then it would be the later half of that period because, well, frankly, exercise equipment sales boom towards the holiday and the New Year period, so you'd release it around the same sort of time as there. And at that point, how much life does the Switch have left in it? Would Nintendo put their time, their effort, their money into making a Ring Fit sequel for a console that is likely to be replaced within a year or so? Really, we just don't know. But looking at it as a moneymaker, I wouldn't be shocked to see this get nixed due to being a more expensive game at the end of a console's life, at least until a Switch successor is out anyway. The type of system and peripherals is critical here, but if there is backwards compatibility with the original Switch, then I think a Ring Fit successor is much more likely to exist at that point to take advantage of the better hardware and existing user base who have Ring Fit already. So with all of that said, where does that leave Ring Fit as IP? The most recent thing we heard was the 2021 investor Q&A, where they said that they had nothing to speak about on Ring Fit at this time, and then we've heard nothing since. So it does feel almost a little bit dead in the water, but as far as taking advantage of the Ring Fit IP goes, I don't think we'll see any main titles, but a spin-off is definitely in the realm of possibility. The best case scenario is one that is sold like Taiko no Tatsujin, where you have the game alone, or you have one with the peripheral, so it takes advantage of the existing user base already. A rhythm spin-off would be really cool, but also a side-scrolling platformer that uses motion for attacking and jumping would be sweet, kinda like Burn It Quest. This would also qualify it as a smaller title that could be produced by EPD4 as a side to a large title like Switch Sports, whilst also taking advantage of the current Ring Fit sales. So looking at everything all together, I really don't feel that Nintendo are going to release anything for the original game, DLC or update wise, or a mainline sequel for the game, because despite that amazing sales track record and the awesome communities around it, Nintendo have moved on already, and I think it's too late in the Switch's life cycle to bring in such a large project. As I said, speculation on my part, of course, but looking at the solid evidence of there just being no talk or no updates, and looking at the circumstantial evidence of the studio working on other things, I just don't think it's realistic that we're going to see anything other than a spin-off on the Switch at this point. Maybe you agree with this, maybe you disagree. Jump down in the comments, let's have a chat, or jump in the Discord and we'll have a discussion about it. I do want to thank my patrons like Rain, I Love Waffles 1311 and Sick Hippie for their fantastic support through Patreon. If you like the content that I do, consider supporting me through there, it really does make a difference. And thank you in general for watching. Make sure that you hit subscribe for more stuff like this. I'm Master Trainer Peter. I'm going to see you in the next video.